Hi, my name is Swati, and I'll be talking about Deleuze's essay, How Do You Recognize Structuralism? At the outset, I'd like to clarify that I'm a student of literature and my background is in literary studies. So, this will not be an exercise in analytical philosophy or critical philosophy. Rather, I'll try and explain the concepts as I understand them from a very literary perspective. Structuralism as a movement formed the bedrock of linguistic analysis. It systematized the study of language. Later on, the principles of structuralism or structuralist analysis were applied to other domains such as anthropology in the works of Levi Strauss, in the psychoanalytical theories of Jacques Lacan, who proclaimed that the unconscious is structured like a language. Structuralist principles are also taken up by the historian Michel Foucault in his renovation of the concept of epistemology. Underneath the surface flux of history, Foucault identified or unveiled certain signposts, which he calls the archaeology of thought. These signposts kind of enable us to navigate through the vast landscape of events, which remain undifferentiated otherwise. Structuralism thus becomes a kind of a plane of cohesion which enables us to connect disparate strands of widely distributed events. In Lacan's psychoanalytical theory, we come across the notion of the symbolic father or the name of the father. And this notion of the symbolic father kind of regulates the distribution of the libidinal economy of the unconscious or the libidinal economy of desire, mapping it within a triadic structure that Deleuze Guattari would later identify as the daddy, mommy, me triangle. Anything and everything that cannot be explained by the structuralist grid falls within the abyss of the real or the non symbolizable chaos. Structure as a concept cannot be confined within the notion of a form since it spills across all formal boundaries, always foregrounding the atomic elements and their combinatory flux. So, the constituent elements of the structure and the dynamics between these constituent particles or atoms or grains kind of determines the form or the outward appearance of the structure. Structure is what accords intelligibility to a certain arrangement of elements, but the conditions of intelligibility remain contingent upon the distribution of the constituent elements of the structure and subject to change. Structuralism does not have an unchanging essence, or it's not a stable corpus of elements. It cannot be represented in terms of an external criteria which remains static, or there is no stable framework of interpretation. Rather, everything is in a state of flux. It's a processual mode of apprehending reality where the structure continually changes or it realigns its coordinates. Structuralism is constitutive of a certain topology of meaning making. The word that Deleuze and Guattari uses, topology, which is uniquely positional. The very word topos does not kind of signify a temporal locality or a temporal space. Rather, it's a certain arrangement of elements within the space that kind of creates the topos. So topos is something that is constituted out of the elements of the structure, and its surface texture or its composition changes and evolves. This topology cannot be localized within temporal coordinates of experience, nor can it be stabilized as an imaginative emplotment of events. What structuralism offers us is a functionalist theory where which is topological and relational with shifting coordinates of interpretation. Since structuralism does not conform to any absolutist notion of meaning making or empirical human existence. Every structure activates a set of differential relations where there is a reciprocity between the constituent elements and the outward form. Each domain constitutes of a cluster of symbolic elements with singular points of convergence. So depending on the domain and depending on the chemistry of the constituent elements, a structure may have various permutations and combinations or different points of convergence between its constituent elements. Each domain constitutes of a cluster of symbolic elements with singular points of convergence, interfaces determining their correspondence. Such singular points of convergence also indicates an actualization of a certain relational equilibrium. Structures as modes of cognition remain embedded in the unconscious and allow a kind of intuitive access to relational possibilities that are concealed within a domain or that exists as a potential or as a probability within the domain. Although we may identify moments of actualization of structuralist principles as material interfaces, such inferences or such material representations are not absolute and may be supplanted by other or newer possibilities. The virtual, this is what I think Delusion Guattari referred to as the virtual potential or the futural potential of structuralism, which kind of exceeds any temporal mapping where its potential remains real without being actual. So in case of virtual, the potential remains real without being actual. Any actualization is always a partial manifestation because there are multiple other modalities of expression or modalities of actualization which cannot be harnessed by a temporal configuration or emplotment. So basically, what structuralism or a structuralist philosophy, according to Delusion Guattari, is a repertoire or reservoir of virtual properties which cannot be quantitatively consolidated but carries infinite possibilities. That was my brief explanation of what I understood from reading the essay. Although it is very rudimentary, I'd still like to hear your comments and suggestions on the same. Thank you.